everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to tie up a few odds and ends on the track car, so let's get started. So today we have a few things to go over to wrap up the track car. First, I'm going to be tying up the engine bay, all the loose connectors that haven't connected yet. Second, I'm going to be installing a Selector rod joint bushing, and I'll go over that a little bit, but it's an easy part to replace, and if you're in there already, I really suggest you do it. Then we'll be installing a new shifter cup, and that's another really cheap part to replace. Then we'll be installing the drive shaft and finally exhaust. And after that, hopefully we can get this thing started. So let's get to it. Alright, so here we go. First we're going to go over the Selector rod joint bushing. So it's this little foam piece right here. And let me see if I can focus here. So it's this little foam piece right here. And this is often one of the most neglected parts to be replaced. And I'll show you where this goes. So the little foam piece goes right behind this. So this is the Selector rod joint. Right here, it connects your Selector rod, obviously. And so we'll remove this, and then I'll show you what the old one looked like and what the new one looked like. And the cool thing about replacing this is if you have sloppy shifting, it's probably a big possibility that that's what's wore out. So even though it's just a little foam piece, it creates a lot of wear and you'll get a lot of slop in the shifter. So let's get started with that. To replace this, or to remove this, to replace the joint bushing, we're going to need to take off this little lock ring right there. So I'm going to get into that right now. Okay, so once you have that lock ring removed, you can see around the bottom there's a little pin. And you need to push that pin out. Once that pin comes out, you can slide this Selector rod off. So believe it or not, this foam piece is supposed to be inside that. Now over the years these deteriorate, they get gunk in there. I'm going to try to see if there's any remnants of the foam piece left. But we'll see. So that's it. This foam piece is that right there. So obviously this has never been replaced in the past. It's probably all original, and that's what's causing a lot of slop in the shifter. So I'm going to replace this and we'll put it back in the car, and should be good as new. so we have the selector rod joint back on. It was a little tougher than I remember. Because of that foam piece is so new, you really have to push the selector rod onto the shaft to get that pin back in. So now that that's all set, let's move on to the shifter cup. So the shifter cup is another very neglected item. They're only like $2 or $3. So whenever I'm doing any sort of shifter related things, I just like to go out and change this. If you've never removed or replaced one of these are reverse threaded as well. So what I like to do, I think there is an OEM tool for this, but I'll just take needle nose pliers like this and I'll stick it in there, and to loosen you're going to need to tighten, you know, so like that. It's about a quarter turn. Oops, I did it all the way. There you go. And then it'll pull right out. And to get it off the ball, you're just going to pull this like that. And you can see how loose this was on here, and that's going to cause slop in the shifter as well. So I said pull this off, and then the other one just simply slides on. And you can see how much tighter it is. So the $2 is well worth it. So now I'm going to install the drive shaft, but there are a few things I want to go over because I get asked a lot of questions about this. First is the center support bearing, and if you are 24 valve swapping your E30, this is obviously the 328i, or it's the same as the M3 drive shaft, you're still going to want to use the E30 center support bearing. Okay, now the center support bearing can be flipped actually, and as you can see there's a higher ridge over here and a shorter one over here, so it does matter, you can't flip it. But the center support bearing has this little lip right here, you see, and that always goes towards the front of the engine, so make note of that. And if you can't remember, make a little drawing with a Sharpie on it to show which way is back and which way is forward. Finally is the flex disc, or the guibo. A lot of people ask which way to put this on, and all of them have little arrows, as you can see. The arrows always point, let me see if I can get this, the arrows always point towards the flange. So this arrow points towards this flange, and as you rotate this you'll see another arrow here. That arrow obviously points towards the transmission flange. So just remember that when you put this on, you don't want to flip it because it will wear out faster. The arrows always point towards the flanges. So let's go install this thing. The last thing I want to talk about with this drive shaft is the preload. So when you install a new, when you replace the drive shaft and you install a new center support bearing, you want to preload the bearing here. And there's a lot of confusion on which way to do it, how much to do it. The Bentley manual says to push the bearing 4 to 6 millimeters forward and then tighten it down. So to do that, you could actually mark with a Sharpie, push it forward and measure 4 to 6 millimeters, or I usually just have pretty good luck of pushing it forward and kind of eyeball it and tighten it down. That wraps up pretty much everything on the track car. We finished up the engine bay, and then we replaced the selector rod joint foam piece, and then we did the selector shifter cup, and then finally we installed the drive shaft and the exhaust. So with the back on the ground now, I'm going to try to start it up and see what it does, and hopefully it works.